Hello, thank you all for joining us on We Are Iowa Plus. I'm Dana Searles, and I'm back this week to recap everything happening in Week 16 at the Iowa Legislature. Now, this was the last scheduled week of the 2025 session. However, it will not be the end. In order for the legislative session to end, lawmakers must pass the state budget, and that has not happened. However, the beginning of the week started with some progress as Senate Republicans and Governor Reynolds reached a compromise on the state budget for fiscal year 2026. In that compromise, the overall budget would be $9.4 billion. Now, most of that money would be given to Medicaid programs and funding school districts. Senate Republicans say at least $1 billion will be allocated towards education. The legislature also still wants to pass its legislation reforming the state's property tax system. Now, Governor Reynolds weighed in on the compromise at the beginning of the week, and she said in part, quote, "We cut taxes to ensure Iowans could keep more of their hard-earned money, and we must maintain spending discipline to ensure it stays that way," end quote, adding that we should continue our focus on putting taxpayers first. Then Senate Majority Leader Jack Whitfer also shared his thoughts on the agreement. He said in part, quote, "This agreement marks an important step forward. We look forward to more conversations with the House of Representatives on how we can pass a sustainable budget for the upcoming fiscal year." Now, in the other chamber, Pat Grassley is giving an update on where the budget bills stand on the House side. He says all of the appropriations bills are now public and 2 have passed out of committee. They freed up sports wagering money and opioid settlement funds. Grassley says one of the main hangups they've had revolves around a $14 million funding priority for paraeducators.
Our caucus feels extremely strong that if we're going to provide that level of support that we did with that bill last year, that we're not going to go back and just cut that and leave our schools in a situation to find the difference.
Now, in response to the House's push for funding paraeducators, Governor Reynolds released a comment this morning. She says in part, quote, "Our negotiations on the budget have never been focused on funding for paraeducators. A final compromise may very well include additional funding for paraeducators, but we currently have a number of differences across budget bills, and I am focused on the total amount of money we are spending across the board," end quote. Lawmakers must pass a budget bill in order to end their work. They will now work without pay until they do. Well, one of Governor Reynolds' top priorities this legislative session is now law. This week, Governor Reynolds signed a bill implementing statewide cell phone restrictions in schools. All Iowa K-12 schools will have to make adjustments next year. All schools will have to at least ban the use of personal electronic devices during class time. Even tighter restrictions will be in place for elementary and middle school students.
And while the positive impacts are undeniable, we can't ignore that our phones can also be a source of constant distraction in our daily lives, whether at home or at work, and especially for our kids at school. The data tells a concerning story.
My grades improved a lot from last year because I'm way less distracted. I used to listen to music too with my AirPods, and that was clearly a distraction because my grades shot up. People talk to each other a lot more, and the students know each other's names as well as the teachers.
Now, schools must set their individual policies by July 1st, and the new rules begin at the start of the next school year. A bill changing the definition of school bullying in state law is now on Governor Reynolds' desk. The bill would remove a list of traits a bully might target to create a, quote, hostile school environment, including a student's race, sexual orientation, religion, and disability status. Now, those in favor argued this bill will make sure all students are seen and everyone gets an equal level of protection.
It actually just clarifies things, makes it easier, makes it really include everybody, not just a small group. So bullying is bullying.
The research tells us what's going to happen, right? Incidences of bullying are ultimately going to go up and enforcement actions are going to go down, unfortunately.
Democrats argued that the state's current law provides teachers with a reference to determine whether a student is bullied. They add this change would be, quote, exclusive. Well, one bill that will reform the practices of pharmacy benefit managers, or PBMs for short, is now past the Senate and going back to the House. But passing the Senate was the biggest hurdle this bill would face. PBMs act as the middlemen and settle prescription prices between pharmacies and insurance companies. Now, pharmacies say the bill helps them from losing money and therefore being forced to close their doors. Well, last year, State Auditor Rob Sand discovered the Iowa Judicial Branch misallocated over $27 million. This week, the House Government Oversight Committee questioned Sand and his findings about why his office didn't come forward sooner. The most important piece here is that no money actually left the government's hands that should not have. It was just placed in the wrong fund. Now, lawmakers want to know what needs to be fixed to avoid future allocation errors. Our Connor O'Neill sat in on the hearing and has more.
Back in 2022, Auditor Rob Sand's office was made aware that state funds were being misallocated. Sand's office then conducted an audit that found the Iowa Judicial Branch improperly distributed $27.5 million in court debt funds due to coding errors over several years. Those errors, Sand said, happened after the state legislature passed bills in 2020 and 2021 that made changes to how court debt was distributed.
This is not a situation where there's fraud involved. This is not a situation where money has been misspent. The system changed and the funds continued to flow partially according to the old system, partially according to mistake as they worked through very quickly their need to reassess and reorient the system.
These state funds were meant for highway maintenance, juvenile detention, and victim compensation. The errors resulted in state funds being underfunded. No money actually left the government's hands. It was just put into the wrong place. House Republicans criticized Auditor Sand on Wednesday for not taking action years before, since his office learned of the issues in late 2022. Lawmakers also asked for verifiable numbers of the coding errors resulting in money going to the state general fund.
I'd like to know how much still went to the wrong place and who was responsible for it continuing to go to the wrong place.
We know that there were no dollars involved here that actually left the state's or the government's hands that should not have.
Even after the auditor's findings, Sand said he doesn't have legal authority to propose sanctions against someone for the errors.
And that was Connor O'Neill reporting. Well, that wraps up our recap for week 16 at the Iowa Legislature. Now, since this week marked the last scheduled week of the legislative session, lawmakers will now have to work into next week without pay. They will go until all of their priorities for this session are finalized and the state budget is settled. Thank you all for watching on We Are Iowa Plus. We'll see you back here next week.